Hi.
I came home early from a business trip. Nothing too unusual, right? I was just trying to surprise Camila, my wife, with an early return. I thought I'd walk in, maybe catch her preparing dinner or lounging with a book, and then we'd go out for a nice evening together. But no. What I found when I opened the door. That's something I never, in a million years, expected. There they were. Camila, my wife of 8 years, in bed with another man. And before you start wondering if it was some kind of mistake, it wasn't. It was clear. He was on top of her, and when she heard the door creak, she froze. She didn't even jump, didn't look surprised. It was almost like she expected me. She barely even tried to pull away, just stared at me, her face going pale. I stood there for what felt like forever, just staring. My chest was tight, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. I couldn't believe it. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The guy? He didn't seem to care, either. He just looked at me like I was some annoying inconvenience who walked in at the wrong moment. Camila finally spoke, her voice shaking, but still cold. "Max, it's not what you think." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to just punch that guy in the face. But I couldn't. I just stood there, frozen, still in disbelief. It didn't feel real. I finally managed to say, "What the hell, Camila?" My voice was calm, too calm, but inside, I was raging. She scrambled to cover herself up, looking embarrassed, but I saw it. The way she couldn't even look me in the eye. We were just talking, Max. It's not what you think. Lies. All lies. I didn't know what to do next. I wanted to demand an explanation, but I wasn't ready to let her off the hook just yet. I stepped out of the room without another word, my heart pounding, every inch of my body screaming in anger and confusion. I didn't know what I wanted from her at that moment, but I sure as hell wasn't going to forgive her just like that. I left the house. No plan. No idea where to go, just somewhere away from her and that guy. I had to think. I didn't trust myself to talk to her right then. And if I stayed, I wasn't sure what I'd say or do. But I knew one thing, I wasn't letting this go without understanding it. I wasn't going to act out of pure emotion. Not yet. I needed evidence. I needed proof. This wasn't just about confronting her, it was about understanding the depth of this betrayal and what my next steps would be. I grabbed my phone from my bag, and just before I left the house, I took a couple of pictures. A few blurry shots of her and the guy still in bed, then another of his things scattered around the room. I wasn't sure why I took them, but deep down, I knew. I knew this was just the beginning of something much bigger than the shock I was feeling right now. Camila was going to lie. I could already feel it. But I was going to get the truth, no matter what. And that was just the start. I didn't sleep much that night. How could I? My mind wouldn't stop racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Camila's face when she saw me standing in that doorway. Her expression was a mix of panic and guilt, and that's the thing that kept me awake. The guilt. I didn't bother going back home. I stayed at a friend's place that night, telling them I was just going through some work stuff and needed a night away. No way I was going to face her right then. The thought of being in that house again, with her acting like nothing happened, was more than I could handle. The next day, I went back to the house. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but it wasn't what I got. Camila was calm, way too calm. When I walked through the door, she was sitting on the couch, all put together like we hadn't just had our world shattered. "Max, we need to talk," she said, as if this was some normal conversation about what we'd have for dinner that night. I couldn't believe how detached she was. But I was done pretending I didn't know. I wasn't going to dance around this anymore. "You want to talk?" I asked, voice tight. "I came home yesterday, and I caught you in bed with another guy. What the hell do you think we need to talk about?" She sighed, like she was the one being inconvenienced. "Max, you're overreacting. It wasn't like you think." Oh, God. I was about to lose it, but I kept my cool. Barely. I pulled out my phone and showed her the pictures I'd taken the night before, the blurry shots of her and that guy, the one she was pretending wasn't there. Her face went pale, and for the first time since I'd caught them, I saw real emotion. Fear. She looked at the photos, then back at me, and then the lies started flowing. "That's not what you think," she said, shaking her head. It was just a mistake. We were drunk. It meant nothing." I felt my stomach twist. "A mistake?" I repeated, not able to believe my ears. "A mistake? You don't get drunk and end up in bed with someone else, Camila. That doesn't happen by accident. You've been seeing him, haven't you? You've been sneaking around behind my back for months, haven't you?" She opened her mouth to respond, but she didn't. Instead, she stood up, pacing, trying to gather her words, but the more she spoke, the worse it sounded. "It's not like that. Max, you're making this so much worse. We didn't mean for it to go that far. He's just a friend, and it was a one-time thing. You have to believe me. A one-time thing? Really? The lies were getting more ridiculous by the second. I couldn't let her keep going like this. No, I said, voice firm now. You don't get to spin this. You've been seeing him. You were in my bed, in our bed, with him. You didn't even look surprised when I walked in. That's not just some accident. She stayed quiet, biting her lip like she was trying to hold back the truth. The silence stretched out, and I couldn't take it anymore. I want his stuff out of this house, Camila, I said, feeling my pulse quicken. I want it gone, and I'm not leaving until you've done that. She looked at me like I was crazy. Max, are you serious? You're going to kick him out of our house? He hasn't done anything wrong. He's the reason everything's falling apart right now, I snapped. You've been sleeping with him behind my back. That's wrong, Camila. He's gone. You're gone. I want him out, and I want you to get your things together. Now. She stood there, glaring at me, but I didn't care anymore. Her words were empty now. All I could hear was the betrayal in the silence between us. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This was a cold, calculated lie. I went upstairs, grabbed a few of his things, clothes, a jacket, some shoes, and brought them downstairs. Her face twisted in frustration. You're acting like a child, Max. This isn't how adults handle things. You're making everything worse. But I wasn't going to be the one who made this worse anymore. She had already done that. I don't care how I'm handling it, I said, taking one last look at her before turning to leave. I'm done, Camila. We'll talk later. But for now, get your stuff together. We're through. I left with his things in my hands, the door closing with a finality that felt like a weight lifting off my chest. She could try to pretend like nothing had happened, but I knew better now. She wasn't the woman I thought I married. She wasn't the person I trusted. And I couldn't stay around to watch her lie any longer. It was one of those days where everything feels like it's moving in slow motion, like the world's still spinning, but you're stuck, trying to make sense of the wreckage. I wasn't sure where to go next. I had packed up the guy's stuff, but I didn't really know what to do with it. Was I supposed to throw it out? Should I leave it somewhere for him to pick up? I didn't even want to think about it. The hardest part was the silence in the house. We'd been together for 8 years, and it had always felt like home. But now, walking through the halls, everything felt foreign. There were things that used to feel so familiar, her coffee cup sitting on the kitchen counter, her shoes by the door, and now they all just felt like reminders of a lie. I spent the next few hours just pacing around, feeling like I was going crazy. The anger was starting to set in, but it was this heavy, cold kind of anger. The kind that made you want to just shut down and disappear, instead of throwing a tantrum or breaking something. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't even want to hear my own voice. I didn't hear from Camila for a while. She sent a text around noon, asking if we could talk. I didn't answer. What was there to say? Everything I needed to hear, she'd already lied about. I wasn't going to sit there listening to more excuses, pretending that somehow we could just go back to normal. But then, a few hours later, she showed up at the door. I wasn't expecting it, but the knock was like a punch to the gut. I wasn't ready for this. Not yet. But there she was, standing on the other side of the door, looking at me like I was the one who had wronged her. Max, please, she said. I know you're angry, but can we talk? I owe you an explanation. I didn't want to hear it. Not right then. Not from her. But I opened the door anyway. I couldn't help myself. I had to see her face to face, I guess, to see if there was any part of the woman I used to know in her anymore. What's left to talk about, Camila? I said, voice flat. You're still lying to me, right? Are you going to tell me you weren't seeing him? That you didn't kiss him? That you didn't sleep with him? Her eyes welled up, and she took a shaky breath. She looked like she was about to say something, but I didn't let her. I don't want to hear it, I continued, cutting her off. I don't want to hear how sorry you are or how it was a mistake. You're not sorry, Camila. You're sorry you got caught. The tears started falling then, but I wasn't moved. I couldn't be. Not anymore. I don't know what to say, Max, she whispered, wiping her eyes. I messed up. I really messed up, and I don't know how to fix it. You don't fix this, I said, shaking my head. You can't fix this. You've broken everything, and you can't put it back together. She stood there for a moment, silent, looking at me like she didn't know what to do next. But I could see it in her eyes, the guilt, the shame, but also, the self-preservation. She wasn't sorry enough to leave me alone. She was just trying to control the situation, to somehow make everything go back to normal. But I wasn't buying it. Max, please. I'm begging you, she said, her voice cracking. We've been through so much together. I love you. I do. I made a horrible mistake. Please don't throw everything away. I felt my stomach twist. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I could still remember the way she'd looked at me when we were happy. That look she had when we'd first met, when I thought I'd found my forever. But now? I was standing here, talking to a stranger. A stranger who had broken me. I can't trust you anymore, Camila, I said, my voice softening, despite myself. I can't even look at you the same way. I'm done. We're done. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Maybe I had. It felt like I had. I watched her stand there for another moment, her face crumpling, but then she turned away without a word. And that was it. The finality of it hit me like a wave, but there was no relief. No closure. Just emptiness. I didn't know how long I stood there after she left. The silence in the house felt heavier than before, like the weight of everything that had happened was settling in. I didn't cry. Not yet. But I knew it was coming. I was just waiting for the moment when the anger would fade and the pain would take its place. I spent the rest of the night going through her things, packing up what I could. I couldn't bear to look at the bed where all of this started. Her side of the closet was empty, her stuff in boxes. I was taking it all to the car when I realized that for the first time in years, the place I'd called home didn't feel like home anymore. I had no idea what tomorrow would look like. Hell, I had no idea what the next minute would look like. But I knew one thing, I was done. And nothing would change that. The worst part? I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just numb. The days blurred together. I don't even remember when the anger started to fade. All I know is that one morning, I woke up and it hit me, this was real. This was my life now. The life I thought I had with Camila was gone. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that I had been living in a lie for so long. Everything we built together? It was all a facade. I spent the next few days in a fog. I didn't really go out, didn't talk to anyone much. My phone stayed silent. I kept wondering what had gone wrong. What did I miss? Had she been unhappy? Did I do something? But then I realized, it didn't matter. Nothing I did could have prevented this. This was her choice. She made it. And now, I was left with the wreckage. The texts and calls from her stopped coming after a while. She had reached out the first couple of days, apologizing, asking for another chance, but I was done responding. There was nothing to say. She'd made her bed, and I wasn't going to lie in it with her. I think she finally got the message. One day, I went back to the house. It was the first time I'd been there in a few days, and I don't know why, but I had to go back. I needed to get my head straight. I was hoping it would feel different, like maybe I could just gather my things, pack up the last remnants of her, and leave for good. But when I walked inside, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Her stuff was still scattered around the house. The clothes, the books, the random things she left in places like the bathroom counter, the kitchen table. It was like she had never left. I couldn't shake the thought of her walking around, living here while she was with him. And I couldn't escape the feeling that maybe she was out there right now, somewhere, living her life like everything was fine. I grabbed a couple of things I needed, then decided I was done. No more trips to this house. No more reminders. I took one last look at the bedroom, the place where everything had shattered. The bed, still unmade, still with the impressions of where she and he had laid. I was done. But then, just as I was about to leave, I heard a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat, and for a second, I froze. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Max, please, let's talk, Camila's voice came through the door. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to hear her voice, but part of me was still hurting, still wondering if maybe, just maybe, there was something I missed. Maybe she could explain herself in a way that would make me understand. I opened the door. Her face was pale, eyes red from crying. She looked so small standing there, and for a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered everything. The lies. The affair. I can't keep doing this, Camila, I said, voice flat. You've had your chance. Over and over, you've had your chance. I'm not going to let you play with my life anymore. She shook her head, tears falling freely now. Max, I know I messed up. I do. I never meant to hurt you like this. I love you. I swear, I do. Please, just let me explain. I can't lose you. I almost laughed. Explain? You want to explain? You were sleeping with him. That's what you want to explain to me. She reached out like she was going to touch me, but I took a step back. I don't want your explanation, Camila. It doesn't matter. You made your choice. Her hand dropped to her side. I saw the frustration in her eyes, but also the desperation. Max, I never meant for it to get this far. It was a mistake. A stupid, horrible mistake. I've been so lost without you. I was confused, and I didn't know what I was doing. Please. I'll do anything to fix this. Please don't walk away. She stepped closer, but I didn't move. You don't get to fix this, I said, shaking my head. You don't get to pretend like everything can go back to how it was. It's over, Camila. For a moment, there was silence. It was thick, heavy, and suffocating. She didn't speak. I didn't speak. We both stood there, staring at each other like strangers, and in a way, that's exactly what we had become. I love you, she whispered, like that would fix everything. I almost said it back. I almost let myself go there, just to feel something. But then I remembered the anger, the betrayal, everything she had taken from me. I don't love you anymore, I said, and I didn't even flinch when the words left my mouth. She looked crushed, like she couldn't breathe. Please don't say that. Please. But it was too late. There was nothing left for us. There was no love, no trust, no hope. Only the shattered pieces of what we once had. I closed the door softly, not wanting to hear her cry anymore. Not wanting to see her face. I needed to go. I needed to get out of this house and out of this nightmare. I walked out to the car, not looking back, but still hearing her sobs faintly through the walls. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel numb anymore. The pain was real. But I was finally starting to let it in. It was time to start over. Even if I didn't know where to begin. The days after Camila left were a blur. I tried distracting myself, work, routine, anything, but the weight of betrayal was always there, pressing down on me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with him, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been living a lie. I went through the motions, but the emptiness was unbearable. I thought about all the good times with Camila, the laughter, the intimacy, and then I remembered the affair. It was like everything we built had been a facade. I knew I couldn't keep wallowing in it, so I reached out to my best friend, Sean. We met up at a bar, and for the first time in days, I felt a little like myself again. Sean was angry about what happened, but he told me, "You deserve better, man. This is on her, not you." As we talked, I started to feel like maybe I wasn't entirely broken. "What now?" Sean asked, half joking. "You gonna date again?" The idea of dating made my stomach turn. I didn't know if I could trust anyone again. But at least I wasn't drowning in grief anymore. I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could start living again. That night, I went home and didn't feel the crushing loneliness I had before. I missed Camila and the life we had, but it didn't feel like an anchor. It felt like a memory that, with time, would fade. The next day, I woke up early, went through some old boxes, and found pictures of Camila and me. I looked at them for a while, remembering the good times. Then, without hesitation, I threw them away. It hurt, but it was necessary. I was letting go. I wasn't healed, but I was moving forward. For the first time, it felt like I had a shot at finding myself again. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Time started to feel a little less heavy, but there were days when it still hit hard. The ache of what I lost would creep up out of nowhere, reminding me that everything had changed. Some days, I felt fine, like I was finally getting my feet under me again. Other days, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, like a weight on my chest I couldn't quite lift. I tried to keep myself busy. I threw myself into work, started going to the gym again, even dusted off some hobbies I had ignored for years. I knew I needed to rebuild myself, piece by piece, and that was the only way I could keep from spiraling. The first week after Camila left was the hardest. I kept thinking about reaching out to her, trying to find some closure, but deep down, I knew I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't sure I ever would be. It felt like I was still too broken to even have a conversation with her. Then, one day, out of nowhere, she called. My heart skipped when I saw her name on the screen, but I didn't pick up. I couldn't. Not yet. I needed space. The next day, I ran into her at the grocery store. It was the first time I'd seen her since the day she left, and I swear, it felt like the ground beneath me shifted. She looked different, thinner, her eyes tired. She looked regretful. "Max," she said quietly when she saw me. "Can we talk?" I stared at her for a second, the anger rising inside me, but I forced myself to keep calm. I didn't want to hear her excuses. Not now. Not after everything. "No," I said, my voice flat. "We're done, Camila." She looked like I slapped her, but I didn't care. I couldn't care. This was the right thing. I turned and walked away. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was carrying a 1,000-pound weight. I wasn't ready to forgive her. But I was finally starting to forgive myself. That was the first step? And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was moving in the right direction. It's strange how the days go by, and you don't even realize that you're slowly starting to heal. After running into Camila at the store, I didn't think I'd feel much of anything. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I felt nothing. No anger, no sorrow. Just peace. It was like the weight had finally started to lift. I had spent so much time focusing on her, on the betrayal, on what I lost. But I realized, I'd been so caught up in what was behind me that I forgot to look at what was ahead. I started going out again, reconnecting with friends. It felt strange at first, like I was stepping back into a life that wasn't mine anymore. But slowly, I began to remember who I was before all of this. Not the man defined by Camila, but the person I used to be, someone who was independent, strong, and happy on his own. A few weeks passed, and I began feeling a little lighter. I was waking up without the constant ache in my chest. I wasn't running from the pain anymore, I was letting it pass through me, knowing that it was part of the process. I kept myself busy, not to distract myself from the hurt, but because I was building something for myself. I was learning how to be okay on my own, and honestly, that felt pretty damn good. One night, I sat down with Sean again, and we talked about the future. We laughed, joked, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a future worth looking forward to. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I wasn't paralyzed by the past anymore. I didn't think I'd ever get to this point. I didn't think I'd ever feel okay again. But I was starting to see that maybe I would be fine, maybe even better than fine. I had my life, and I had me. And that was enough for now. Camila wasn't coming back, and I wasn't going to wait around for her. I wasn't even sure I wanted to see her again. But I knew this was my life to rebuild, and I was doing it. Slowly, steadily, one day at a time. And I was okay with that. More than okay, actually. I was finally free. Just when I thought I was starting to get my life back together, something happened that I didn't expect. One evening, as I was leaving work, I bumped into Camila. Again. This time, she wasn't looking as tired or worn out. She looked like she had put herself together, like she had taken the time to figure things out, to reflect. But her eyes? They weren't the same. There was something different. Something raw, almost vulnerable. "Max, can we talk?" she asked, standing in front of me, her voice quiet but sincere. I hesitated. The last thing I wanted was to go back down that road again. I was done. But as I looked at her, something tugged at me. Maybe it was the way she stood there, no longer trying to convince me of anything, just waiting for me to decide. So, against my better judgment, I nodded. We found a quiet spot to sit down, and she didn't waste any time. "I know I've hurt you," she started, her voice shaky. "And I know I don't deserve a chance to explain myself, but I need you to understand something. I've made a mess of everything. And I'm sorry. Truly, I am." I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave, to walk away and keep moving forward with my life. But the other part of me, maybe the part that still cared, felt like there was something I needed to hear, something I wasn't going to get unless I gave her a moment. "I don't expect forgiveness," she continued, "but I hope one day you'll understand why I did what I did. I was lost, Max. I was selfish. But it wasn't about you. It was about me, and not knowing who I was anymore." I didn't say anything at first. I just listened. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't ready to forgive her, either. I was still hurt, and I wasn't sure if that would ever change. "I've been seeing someone else," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I thought maybe it would make me feel better, fill the void. But it didn't. It never will. I've realized something important. I lost the one person I truly loved. And that's something I can never get back." I sat there, processing her words, feeling the old wounds begin to open again. I didn't know what to say. There was so much I still didn't understand. "Why now? Why after all this time? I don't need you to fix things," she added. "I just needed you to know that I'm sorry, and that I messed up. But I'm not asking for another chance. I'm just asking for peace. For both of us." I didn't know what peace looked like in this situation. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I might be closer to it. Not because of her words, but because I realized that I didn't need her to make me whole again. I didn't need her apology to heal. I was doing that on my own. "I think I'm finally starting to find peace, too," I said, meeting her gaze. "But it's not with you. It's with myself. And I think that's enough." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. She didn't fight it, and neither did I. In that moment, I finally understood something. I didn't need closure. I had been holding on to the past, but I was starting to see that the future was something I needed to create for myself. As she walked away, I didn't feel anger or bitterness. I just felt done. And that, in itself, felt like a victory. Maybe the real peace wasn't about forgiving her. It was about letting go. Weeks passed, and something began to shift inside me. Camila's apology, while hard to swallow, had marked a turning point. Not because I wanted to jump back into anything with her, but because I finally realized I didn't need her apology to move on. I had already begun that process. I had started living my life again, without waiting for closure, without waiting for answers. I wasn't healed completely, but I was healing. Slowly, steadily, and without the pressure of figuring it all out in one go. I threw myself into work, and for the first time in months, I found joy in it again. I wasn't using it as a distraction or a way to avoid my feelings, I was enjoying it because it felt like me again. The version of myself that didn't have to explain anything to anyone. I was just living. I also reconnected with friends I had neglected, ones I'd distanced myself from during the worst of the pain. We'd go out for drinks, talk about life, laugh like we used to, and it felt so damn good. I was remembering who I was before Camila, before the heartbreak. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living. One weekend, I found myself on a solo trip to a nearby town, just to get away. It was quiet there, peaceful in a way that made me feel like I was exactly where I needed to be. I sat by the water, watching the sun dip below the horizon, and for the first time, I didn't feel the constant ache in my chest. I didn't feel like I was missing something. I felt whole. When I returned, I started doing more for myself. I signed up for a cooking class, something I'd always wanted to do. I wasn't a chef, but I liked the idea of trying something new, something that was mine. Something that wasn't tied to any past version of me. It felt like a small but important step in figuring out who I was now. A few months after Camila's apology, I hadn't heard from her. I wasn't expecting to, either. She had done what she came to do, and I had done what I needed to do, move on. But I was no longer angry. I had no resentment toward her anymore, no bitterness. What we had was over, and that was okay. The journey of moving on wasn't a straight line. There were moments where the memories of her would hit me out of nowhere, and I'd feel that familiar stab of pain. But I'd let it come, let it pass, and then keep going. I had learned to sit with my pain instead of running from it. And in doing that, it lost some of its power over me. One night, as I was cooking dinner for myself in my apartment, I thought about how far I'd come. I'd gone from feeling utterly broken to now feeling like I was starting over, but not from scratch, more like I was adding new layers to myself. I had learned things about myself that I never would have known if not for this pain. And then, just as I was about to sit down to eat, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a friend I hadn't seen in a while, asking if I wanted to grab a drink. My first instinct was to say no. But then I stopped. What was I afraid of? The past? Feeling vulnerable again? I smiled and replied, yeah, let's go. Because that's the thing I had learned through all of this, life doesn't stop. You don't stop living because things fall apart. You pick yourself up, piece by piece, and you start living again. And maybe, just maybe, you find out that life can be even better than before. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. It's funny how life keeps moving, whether you're ready for it or not. There were days when I felt like I was still trudging through the past, but more and more, I found myself looking ahead. The days no longer felt heavy. They felt like opportunities. That night, when I went out with my friend, I realized something. The old me, the one I had been before Camila, was still in there. He wasn't gone, just buried for a while. And now, he was starting to show up again. I was laughing, joking, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was just going through the motions. I was really living. I wasn't trying to force myself to forget the past or pretend like it didn't hurt. I still had moments when I thought about her, about what happened, about how it had all gone wrong. But I didn't let it control me anymore. I wasn't living in the shadow of her betrayal. I was building a life for myself. A few months later, I met someone. I wasn't looking for it, wasn't even sure I was ready for it, but sometimes, life throws you things when you least expect them. It wasn't anything serious, not yet, but it felt good to know that I could still open myself up to someone. I didn't rush it. I wasn't trying to fill any holes. I wasn't trying to replace Camila. I was just living, figuring things out as they came. For once, I felt like I didn't have to have everything figured out. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. What Camila had done was terrible, but it was her choice, and in the end, I realized it was the best thing for both of us. I wouldn't have found the strength I had now if I hadn't gone through that pain. It was a painful chapter, but it was a chapter. Not the whole book. And now? Now, I was writing my own story. Life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges ahead, but I wasn't afraid of them anymore. Because I had learned that no matter how hard things get, no matter how broken you feel, you can always rebuild. One step at a time. One day at a time. And that was exactly what I was doing, moving forward, living for me, and learning how to love my life again.
Bye.